And good evening now. Thanks for being with us on this Wednesday night, February 22nd, as we recap what happened in the courtroom today in the Alec Murdaugh double murder trial, as the disgraced attorney is accused of shooting and killing his wife Maggie and son Paul. After we go over today's testimony, we're going to be joined by criminal defense attorney Lori Murray for her take on the latest developments. It is still unclear tonight if Alec Murdaugh will take the stand in his own defense. Today, defense attorney Jim Griffin told Judge Clifton Newman that a final decision hasn't been made. Griffin said if they put Murdaugh on the stand, they wanted an order that would prevent the prosecution from asking Murdaugh about his alleged financial crimes. Well, the prosecution objected, saying cross-examination should be wide open here, adding that the alleged financial crimes have a lot to do with Murdaugh's credibility. At first, Judge Newman said he agreed with the state, saying what the defense was asking for was unheard of. But now it seems the judge will proceed on a case-by-case basis. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Now, on the witness stand today, Mark Ball, an attorney who worked with Murdaugh at his law firm. Ball was one of the first people to arrive at Murdaugh's property on the night of the murders. He told defense attorney Jim Griffin that he was concerned that the crime scene was not being secured. He described seeing evidence in the feed room where Paul was shot when he visited the morning after the murders.
Looking around around the floor and all that, there was a piece of Paul's skull about the size of a baseball laying there.
Did that upset you?
It did, very much. I mean, it just really infuriated me. And I don't know who I was supposed to be mad at, but it just infuriated me that this young man had been murdered and there were still his remains there.
During cross-examination, Ball said that Murdaugh did not seem to be actively looking for answers as to what happened on the evening of June 7th. Ball also spoke about his reaction to the roadside shooting incident where Murdaugh claimed an unknown man shot him in the head while he was changing a flat tire. Take a listen.
I don't know how you're supposed to react when you lose your wife and your child in such a brutal manner, but no, to answer your question, I didn't see him on the phone like I was trying to call clients and did you hear anything, did you see anything, those kinds of things. So, I mean, the answer is no, I didn't see him doing that. I wasn't around him all the time, but no, I did not.
Also on the witness stand today, Dawes Cook, an attorney defending Murdaugh in a civil suit filed in connection with the fatal boating accident involving Paul Murdaugh. Questions from the defense downplayed the lawsuit over the boat crash. Cook testified that he felt it was a winnable case.
That eventually they would allege negligence for having let him use the boat, which is the substance of the claim now. But even that, we always felt like it was a defensible claim. That I think the big picture that occurred to me was to hold him liable for that would be to hold him to a higher standard than any of the other parents of the other folks that were in the boat.
And under cross-examination, Cook was asked if he knew about Murdaugh's alleged financial crimes when he joined the boat crash defense team.
At this point in time, in May of June of 2021, just getting on the defense team, you certainly didn't know anything about his true financial condition, did you?
No.
You didn't know he'd been stealing money for years and years, did you?
No.
You didn't know that he was broke, did you?
No.
You didn't know he had misappropriated funds and was scrambling to try to replace those before people found out, did you?
No.
Defense attorneys called another independent forensic examiner today, Kenneth Zersi. He specializes in fingerprints and footprints. He testified that he felt investigators could have done a better job at the crime scene. He talked specifically about the feed room where Paul was first shot.
Did you see any evidence of any fingerprints, any effort to lift fingerprints, when I say lift, to identify fingerprints in that room or anywhere else on the property that night?
Again, not to the best of my knowledge.
And Murdaugh family housekeeper Barbara Mixon was called by the defense today. She was very close with the family, working with Libby Murdaugh for over 40 years. Libby is Alec Murdaugh's mother. She said that she called Alec Murdaugh on the afternoon of June 7th, told him his mother was agitated and he needed to visit with her later that day. She was also asked about the blue tarp that caretaker Shelley Smith testified that she saw at Murdaugh's parents' home.
Did you see a tarp opened up anywhere in Ms. Libby's house?
No, sir.
No blue tarp? You see no blue tarp on a rocking chair?
No, sir.
Have you ever seen a blue tarp laid out in the house?
I've never seen a blue tarp laid out in the house.
All right, let's talk about what happened in the courtroom today. Criminal defense attorney Lori Murray is joining us tonight. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for letting me have it.
Let's talk about what we led with in this report tonight. Will Alec Murdaugh testify and some of the confusion surrounding what the judge said in court today? I believe the defense wanted the judge to prevent the prosecution from asking about the alleged financial crimes. Prosecution says, well, this goes to the crux of his credibility.
Correct.
And at first, it seemed Judge Newman agreed, saying, never heard of something like this. But then later in the day, we heard him say basically he was going to take this on a case-by-case basis. What's going on here?
Well, I think that Judge Newman has been doing everything on a case-by-case basis. That's been his traditional standby quote. But at the beginning of the day, obviously the defense asked the judge to limit the testimony just to the acts surrounding this particular murders, not the financial crimes. But the problem with that is that the financial crimes are actually related to motive. So I don't know that you can get into one without getting into the other. But the other problem for the defense is that those charges are still outstanding. So we don't know whether he can actually say anything other than I plead the fifth.
Right.
So in the morning, the judge said, I've never heard of anybody asking me to limit their own witness's testimony. And then in the afternoon, he said, you know what, he kind of backed off of it a little bit to seem a little bit less biased towards the state and said, we'll just do it on a case-by-case basis. Whenever you ask the question, that's when you make the objection and we'll decide at that point.
And there's some discussion tonight about whether or not Alec Murdaugh takes the stand. If he takes the stand, does he have to answer, I take the fifth for everything, or can it just be about certain questions that he is asked on the stand when it perhaps pertains to the alleged financial crimes?
Well, we were laughing earlier and said, you know, he should take the fifth on every question except for, did you kill Paul and Maggie? And then you say no. But I think if it has to do anything to do with the financial crimes, he has to say, I plead the fifth, because those charges are still outstanding. I think the jury has to be instructed that he has outstanding charges. They already know about those financial crimes. So, yeah, whether he testifies or not is obviously the big question. I've heard from two separate inside sources that he is going to testify. So we'll see. I don't know if he will or not, but I do believe that he is going to be saying, I plead the fifth a lot.
If he was your client, would you put him on the stand, and if so, why?
I have gone back and forth on this, and it depends on the day. After hearing the OnStar testimony, I thought that is too much for him to answer for. There is no way that he can make it through cross-examination on this OnStar testimony. And then the defense has a great day yesterday. So I'm like, well, maybe we do put it back on. And then the defense has a day like today where it is definitely scored for the prosecution, and it becomes another question of whether he can answer for all of the things that have been put out into evidence today. Mark Ball's testimony, how his friends and how he has cheated everybody, including the people he loves, including people who have dying wives. I mean, if you really think that he can answer for that, then you put him up.
And if you wouldn't put him on the stand, why would you keep him from testifying tomorrow?
You keep him from testifying because all he can do is hurt himself. I mean, we have to remember that, and I keep trying to remind everybody on my social media platform that the state bears the burden of proof. The defense has no burden here. The state bears the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and not just that that Alec was a bad person or that he was there. They have to prove he actually pulled the trigger. So if you can prove that this investigation was shoddy enough by SLED, that there was more that they could find out, that they ruled out anybody else, that they only focused on him, that might be enough to get you reasonable doubt. And you don't want to mess up that reasonable doubt that you have by putting your client on the stand and making him look guilty.
So is it a big risk to put him out there tomorrow?
It's a huge risk. huge risk.
What's the biggest thing that could it backfire on him or what?
You know, they're going to ask him questions that he can't answer. What about the 20 seconds? Where are you? What did you do during 20 seconds? How did you check those bodies during 20 seconds? Why did you lie about your alibi? And honestly, I thought at the beginning that he had to answer to that. But those are things that can be overlooked if you have that if you believe that expert that said that the shooter was 5'2" to 5'4". But it is just a huge risk, and he can only hurt himself. I don't know that he can explain anything at this point to a degree that would make a jury want to find for him.
We heard some testimony today that a large number of people were walking around the crime scene the night of the murders, which has to be concerning.
Right.
If you are the prosecution. You're hearing testimony that, gosh, not only were first responders on the scene, but this person, walking around the crime scene, contaminating the scene, right?
Right. I mean, Murdaugh being one of the main ones. I think Murdaugh was he was on the scene the next day, walking in and out of the feed room where Paul was shot, and he was a terrible witness for the defense today. I mean, he really was angry at Alec Murdaugh for stealing from him and from stealing from their firm, from breaking up their family. And at the same time, they had to call him to show how bad a job SLED did because he found a piece of Paul's skull still in that room. After SLED has done their investigation, there are still buckshot laying around. He said they were everywhere in his words. And this is somebody who goes on to really testify badly for Alec Murdaugh. So he's credible in what he's saying about how bad this crime scene still looked. He asked the SLED agents if they needed to come back in there, and they said no. He said, you don't want to get this buckshot? And he said, no, we've got everything we need. And there's still a piece of Paul's skull laying on the floor.
But a possible contaminated crime scene, is that something the defense can hang their hat on when you've got all this other evidence showing that Murdaugh lied about this, that, or the other?
We only need reasonable doubt. I mean, we have reasonable doubt is defined as that which would make a reasonable person hesitate to act. So we only need reasonable doubt that he was the shooter. And if you keep showing how bad the investigation was and how they didn't look for anybody else other than Alec Murdaugh, he's the only one they focused on. And if you can put that up there enough times to where this jury hears it over and over and over again, then yeah, I think that's enough. I think that creates reasonable doubt.
If we don't hear from Alec Murdaugh tomorrow, is that the end of the defense's case, or do they have other experts or any other witnesses they might put on the stand?
Dick Harpootlian said that they are going to Friday, and I think that he will go till late Friday in the afternoon, especially if Alec testifies. He definitely still has to put John Marvin up, Alec's brother. I think there are some other lay witnesses. I was still hoping for another expert that would back up the forensics guy that he put up yesterday, but obviously that didn't happen today. So I'm still hoping that there is a little bit more expert testimony, but definitely there's some lay testimony to go.
Why is it important that Murdaugh's brother testify?
John Marvin was a big part of the crime scene that night. He went to John Marvin's house immediately after. Well, they went to Alameda, and then he went to stay with John Marvin. But for me, the biggest part is that John Marvin was walking around with the SLED agent when she was doing the search. He's the one who found Maggie's phone or helped them find Maggie's phone. He's the one who literally escorted the SLED agent around the house. And honestly, if you've got somebody who's looking over your shoulder while you're doing your search, are you really going to do a thorough search? I don't know that you're really doing a thorough search when you have somebody who's looking over your shoulder that's related to the number one suspect.
So the defense, they said, I believe, without the jury present, that they thought they would wrap up their case sometime by Friday afternoon. Let's say we wrap up 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. You don't foresee any instance where closing arguments would begin then, or would we wait until possibly Monday for that to begin?
It really is in the judge's discretion as to whether he wants to do closing arguments, whether he would want to separate closing arguments from the jury instructions, and I don't think he would. You usually hear the words closing and charging at the same time. So I think that he would probably close closing arguments and instruct the jury on Monday.
You say reasonable doubt. Let's say there is a juror out there that's holding out. They don't get a unanimous decision. mistrial. What happens if there's a mistrial?
It was estimated that the state has spent $1.1 million on this trial. But this is one of those, honestly, that has become a point of pride for the Attorney General's office. I think that our Attorney General, being an elected official who has managed to find time to sit at that table front and center and not do a single witness, I think that he is going to try this case again if there is a mistrial. I don't see an instance where he just goes, okay, well, this is one we can't win. I think he has put his reputation on the line on this case, and I think he would try it again.
And I know I'm asking you to speculate, but that wouldn't be something that would happen later this year, would it? Or would we just wait a little while?
God, I would hope that Dick Harpootlian would not push for another speedy trial, but honestly, at that point, it would be, now that they know what they're doing when they're trying, they already have their witnesses, it's pretty much getting another jury to hear the same case and maybe tweaking the way you try it a little bit. So it could be tried at any time. I mean, mistrial cases, especially when it's still in, the public eye and the media, they tend to come back around pretty fast.
I've been reading some of the comments online, and I've been listening to people out in public about this trial. 1 minute, people are saying, well, I believe this happened. And then the next minute, it's like, well, wait a minute. Now I think that perhaps this happened. Looking at the case as a defense attorney, is this an open and shut case when it comes to proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt?
Not in any way, shape, or form. And I haven't seen a lot of people flipping. I think that people have specifically said either, yes, he's guilty, and they say it in a really horrible way, or they say, I just don't think the state has proven their case. And for me, I think that it has pretty much been yeah, he was there. He was absolutely there at the crime scene. We know that from the videotape, so we know he lied about that, and that makes you look guilty. But we also have a whole lot of other things that cast a little bit of doubt on this this whole theory. The fact that he had, I think it was 18 minutes to get from the shootings, doing the shootings and getting to his house and changing and cleaning up and getting on the road. That's not a lot of time. That's a really tight timeline. And then you have the expert that comes in and says that, the shooter's between 5'2" and 5'4". And we got in a whole big discussion about that on social media over this, miniature shooter. And so I did the math, I did the math on my TikTok, because they said that Alec Murdaugh's to his knee is 25 inches and he's 6'4", so that's 76 inches. So they were all saying that he was kneeling down. Right. So I'm like, okay, so you take 76, you minus the 25, you're left with 55 something inches, and that makes him 4'2". That's still not enough. So then they said, well, he was on the four-wheeler. So everybody, if they have their viewpoint, they are keeping their viewpoint, and they are manipulating the evidence to fit their narrative.
Yeah, the defense is basically saying he's 6 feet taller. He's too tall to have committed these crimes. I'm going to go with both the defense, prosecution, and then I'll ask you a final question about the judge. Okay. Well, actually, the judge is up now. We'll start with Judge Newman. What kind of job do you think he's done with his trial so far?
I'm a huge fan of Judge Newman, and he's done a phenomenal job throughout his career. And I did my first deposition against Judge Newman back when we were both in private practice, and I'm still in private practice, back when he was in private practice. So I think he's done a really good job. He's trying really hard to be fair. That's why he's not willing to make these rulings without hearing the objection first. That's why he wants to say, on a case-by-case basis, make your objection. But I also still think that there are times when he seems a little bit biased towards the state. I think that, and there was one point today where the female attorney, Maggie, who works for Jim Griffin, was asking a question that seemed to be the same exact question that Creighton Waters had just asked previously. She just worded it a little bit differently. Right. And Creighton Waters objected to it, and he sustained the objection twice. And I'm like, but he just asked that same question. So there does seem to be a little bit of, he did even come off the bench and object on his own at one point during Dick Harpootlian's cross. So I think that maybe the defense is getting a little bit, or the state may be getting a little bit better deal from Judge Newman at this point. But I think he's doing his best to be fair and get back around to a fair trial.
You can talk about the state. What kind of job do you think they've done in presenting the evidence against Alec Murdaugh?
During their case in chief, I thought the evidence, the witnesses were called a little bit out of order. Some of the evidence was cumulative and not needed. There were some things that they put into evidence that we still, like I have no idea why we're talking about the mark on the back of Maggie's leg, because they've never given us any context for it. So there are a lot of things that they put in that we don't know about. And then, during the cross-examination, there's a lot of theatrics and a lot of anger that's just seething out of these lawyers that sometimes backfires and sometimes doesn't. So I'd give them, if I had to grade them, I'd probably give them a C+.
C+, all right. How about Dick Harpootlian and Jim Griffin, the defense team? What about the job they've been doing?
I think I told you this last night. Us lawyers sat back and said, okay, we're going to see a really good case, and we're going to see some good lawyers, and we just haven't seen that. I would probably give them a C to a C+.
Wow, goodness. Yeah. All right, and again, the lingering question tonight, will he or won't he, will Alec Murdaugh take the stand in his own defense? I believe a final decision, we're being told, is being made tonight, but you're hearing already that he will most likely be on the stand
That's
tomorrow.
what I'm hearing, but I'm not promising, but I've heard from 2 separate sources that he is taking the stand.
All right. Lori Murray, criminal defense attorney, thank you so very much for your time.
Thanks for letting me in.
Testimony resumes at 9:30 in the morning, and we will be there as we have been since this all started in late January. You can watch beginning at 9:30 tomorrow morning on News 19 several ways. WLTX Plus. You can watch on our YouTube page, and you can watch on WLTX.com. And if Alec Murdaugh is to take the witness stand tomorrow, you'll be able to watch that testimony on WLTX Channel 19, if in fact he takes the stand tomorrow. We'll be there. We'll have you covered from beginning to end. We'll see you then.